called in. He needs to get to somewhere where he can operate against Boudicca.
Paulinus hurried to Londinium, present-day London, but he had too few men at his disposal. He didn't want to end up like Cerealis and rush into battle only to be defeated. He needed time to build up an army. He decided to do the unthinkable and abandon London. The people of London begged him for help, but Paulinus ignored their pleas and left them to the mercy of the Britons. He would sacrifice London to try and save the province. Boudicca's troops surged into the town. They slaughtered Roman civilians and Britons alike, and in a day-long rampage, sacked the town.
The Boudicca rebellion was very serious. It was bad news for Rome. And quite apart from anything else, 80,000 people who were friendly to Rome, and including Romans themselves, were massacred by the rebels right at the beginning of the revolt. So it was really bad news, and there was even a possibility that the Romans might have been thrown out of Britain, and that would have been a disaster for Roman prestige.
In one day, Boudicca had destroyed one of the centres of Roman influence in Britain. Now the Romans had to stop her, or they would lose Britain altogether. 61 AD, Boudicca, Britain's warrior queen, is fighting to end the Roman occupation of Britain. The Roman general Paulinus ordered his army to march east. But while they were still on the move, Boudicca sacked Verulamium, ancient St. Albans. The warrior queen seemed unstoppable. Now she turned north along the main Roman road, Watling Street.
Boudicca moves pretty swiftly, almost along the lines of Roman communication. The roads that had been an instrument of Roman domination become something that actually helps her accelerate through this young province.
Paulinus had gathered more troops, including several hundred cavalry, but his 10,000 men were still greatly outnumbered, and they were tired from the long march. Paulinus expected the second legion to come to his aid, but the general in charge, Postumius, thought this was a suicide mission and refused.
It may be that he was just too frightened. He realized that the crunch had come, and he perhaps thought that the Boudicca's warriors would totally overwhelm Paulinus, and he wasn't going to be caught in that disaster too.
Postumius' fears were well grounded. The Romans faced a force of at least 30,000 Britons, and many believed it to be much, much bigger. They were well supplied and supported by a huge baggage train. Paulinus and his weary veterans would be massively outnumbered. The Romans marched along Watling Street to meet them. Watling Street was the major Roman road north through Britain. Road building was a vital part of the Roman occupation. With good straight roads, they could move troops quickly around the country. Paulinus was an experienced commander. He knew he had to fight Boudicca's forces on a battlefield that neutralized her greatest strength, her superior numbers. He found one. No one knows its exact location, but most likely somewhere near here in the West Midlands.
He had one advantage, and one big advantage, and that is he could choose the actual battle site. And he knew that he would be totally outnumbered by the rebels, who at this stage are supposed to have numbered something between a quarter and a third of 1,000,000 men. I mean, a huge, huge force.
Paulinus wanted to give Boudicca little room to maneuver, so he chose a battlefield which had thick woods on either side. This field was broad at one end, but narrow at the other. Paulinus placed his army at the point where the field narrowed. Boudicca lined up her troops directly opposite where the land broadened out. The woods would provide vital protection to the outnumbered Roman army's flanks and rear. To Boudicca and her British warriors, it must have looked like easy pickings. Here were the Romans outnumbered at least 3-1, deliberately drawing themselves up in a place that offered no retreat. The Britons could simply press in and hack away until the last legionary fell.
The Romans, after all, seem to be on the back foot. They've been hit badly. 3 towns have been pulverised. The 9th Legion mauled in an ambush.
Boudicca's forces were so confident of victory they brought along their women and children to watch the action from a huge crescent of wagons drawn up behind the battlefield.
They were on the up. They had been tremendously successful. This was like, a tremendous event which everybody was supporting. The whole family was there, and to cheer on the victors as they saw it.
The Roman historian Tacitus, writing less than 50 years afterwards, put speeches in the mouths of both commanders, hatred seething from their lips. He writes that before the battle, Paulinus told his men, "Despise the savage uproar, the yells and shouts of undisciplined barbarians. In that mixed multitude, the women outnumber the men." Meanwhile, across the battlefield, Boudicca rallied her forces. From the pride and arrogance of the Romans, nothing is sacred. All are subject to violation. The old endure the scourge, and the virgins are deflowered. This would be the climax of Boudicca's rebellion. This was the chance to smash Roman power in Britain. The Britons made the first move, and with an almighty roar, the horde took up their weapons and charged at the Romans. The very first Battle of Britain had begun. This time the Romans knew what they were facing, and they would not